Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to our program. It is Ajmal Masroor live here on TV1. We're talking about Sri Lanka. I don't know whether you've been following the news, but lately we've been listening and hearing and watching in horror what's happening in Sri Lanka. Muslim community, though they form almost 10% or more percentage of population in Sri Lanka, have been subjected to many draconian policies of the government, especially the Sinhalese Buddhist government, that recently they have enacted a law forcibly cremating all the COVID patients or COVID infected dead or suspected of COVID infection. When they die, they are being forcibly cremated. They have no choice. They have no other say. World community, leaders of various countries, including United Nations Human Rights Commission, as well as other agencies, have condemned this act. Against the World Health Organization's own advice, Sri Lankan government is acting almost, how would I say, on a trigger-happy basis. On this particular topic we want to discuss and we want to debate. Of course, we want to hear from you. Just so that we understand, let me say this in Bangla too. Sri Lanka-te amader Musalman community উপরে বিরাট একটা জুলুম চলতেছে এখন। কোভিড-19 এর মধ্যে যদি কেউ মারা যান অথবা কোভিড-19 এ সন্দেহযুক্ত কেউ যদি মারা যাওয়ার সময় কোভিড-19 এর ইনফেকশনের ব্যাপারে সন্দেহ হয়, তাহলে এই দুই গ্রুপের মানুষকে জোরালোভাবে জ্বালানো হচ্ছে শ্রীলঙ্কাতে। এর জন্য আমরা পৃথিবীর বিভিন্ন জায়গা থেকে, বিভিন্ন গভর্নমেন্ট সরকার থেকে প্রতিবাদ আসছে, কিন্তু শ্রীলঙ্কার গভর্নমেন্ট কারো কথা শুনতেছে না এখন। এই ব্যাপার নিয়ে আমরা আজকে আলোচনা করব। আমাদের গেস্ট সবাই ইংরেজিতে কথা বলবেন, তো আপনারা যদি প্রোগ্রামে কোনো বাংলা প্রশ্ন করতে চান আমার সাথে করতে পারেন ইনশাআল্লাহ, but most of our program will be in English today. Let's go back to our program and introduce you to our guests. Let me introduce our guests one at a time. I know all of them in person. I've seen them and I've grown up around them, at least Sir Iqbal Sakrani for sure, former Secretary General of Muslim Council of Britain and member of the MCB's Sri Lanka Task Force. Assalamu alaikum, Brother Iqbal.
Wa alaikum assalam, Brother Ajmal.
How are you?
Alhamdulillah, brother, I'm well, and I hope and pray all of you are well. And Jazakallah for giving me the opportunity to be on the program with you.
You're welcome. I'm sorry I introduced you as somebody much older than me, but you are my senior, my elder. I have seen you from my very youth. Alhamdulillah, may Allah give you long life, inshallah. We also have been joined by Amjad Salim. He is a British Sri Lankan currently working with the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies in Geneva. And he is here. Alhamdulillah, he has done many program and work, and I have got a long list here. I will not read them all, but over time, inshallah, we'll introduce him, inshallah. Amjad Salim, salamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam, Brother Ajmal. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, how are you?
Good, alhamdulillah. Good to be on program. Good to be in touch with you again.
Jazakallah khair. I remember you from the young Muslim days. May Allah give you long life.
I grew up around you. As you grew up around Sir Iqbal. So.
Now, also we've been joined by Dr. Kamal Abul Nasser, who is a doctor and from Jaffna. He is a medical doctor in GP. Is that General Internal Medicine from Colombo?
Yes, I'm a consultant physician. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And you are practicing currently where?
Sherwood Forest Hospital, that's Mansfield, Nottinghamshire.
Very good, very good. Thank you very much, and salamu alaikum to you too. Thank you for joining us. Let's go straight into this program. Brother Iqbal, please tell us what's going on. MCB is showing keen interest on this. You are a member on the MCB's Sri Lanka Task Force. Why do you need a task force? What's going on in Sri Lanka?
Well, in view of the seriousness of the issue, Brother Ajmal, and the importance it has not just for the Muslims in Sri Lanka, but it has its ramifications to Muslims and people of other faith who believe in burial of their dead around the world. As you know, sometime in March 2020, the government of Sri Lanka, for some odd reason through their health department, issued a directive that all the COVID victims who die from COVID should be cremated. irrespective of what faith or background they come from. Now, initially it was felt that it was really concerned with issues of COVID, and as we all know, through the guidelines issued by the World Health Organization and other medical virologists and other scientists around the world, that the spread of COVID virus does not take place in dead bodies once they are buried. It stays there within 3 days if they are victims of COVID, and then it, of course, disappears. And more importantly, COVID virus is not spread in such manner where it slips through the earth into the water system, which is the reason what the Sri Lankan government has given, the danger it poses on the community at large.
Okay.
So basically, this is the reason why it was felt so important that we have to address this matter urgently, and that's why the MCB set up this task force dedicated in ensuring that we get the message across to the community and try and get the message across to the Sri Lankan government internationally, and if possibly through the legal means to ensure that this is not just against basic human rights, but it infringes every international convention and legality.
Thank you very much for that good update that we obviously needed as the backdrop to our program. Now let's go to Amjad. Amjad Salim, you have been a very active advocate for Sri Lankan people and their rights, especially the Muslim community. Tell us a bit more about the context and the background. Why would Sri Lankan government make such a draconian policy that they would forcibly cremate Muslims and Christians against their will, and it's against their religion? What's going on? What's the context?
Thanks, Masroor. I think this is obviously a very personal issue as well. So I'm speaking here not from my official capacity, but more from a personal capacity. Look, over the last 10 years, particularly after the end of the conflict in 2009, there has been an increasing pressure upon minorities, both Christians and Muslims, as the singular Buddhist community sort of, manifested their power. I think the conflict gave them a sense of new energy, and that enabled them to consolidate their power. And so over the last 10 years, you've seen an increasing hate speech, increasing action against both Christians and Muslims. But of course, in the last few years, Muslims have become more and more victims of that. And in particular, after the Easter Sunday attacks last year, I think there's been an increasing scrutiny on Muslims, where there's been a niqab ban, there've been unlawful detentions of people suspected of being linked to the bombers and other aspects. So I think this has been something that we've seen that is there. And so the first cremation gazette that came in April is part of this wider perspective of how the majority community, which is unfortunately radical singular Buddhist in nature, is standing now to create a system and an ecosystem that is sort of articulating that minorities, particularly those who are not Buddhist, are not necessarily welcome in Sri Lanka or have a specific guest status. So they have only certain rights and privileges, and they cannot depart from that.
It increasingly sounds like what happened to the Muslims in Myanmar.
Absolutely.
So it's the same. Is that the same strain or same virus of Buddhism, extreme Buddhism, that's plaguing Myanmar, that's now infecting Sri Lanka?
Yes. So first of all, both Myanmar and Sri Lanka have the same theological and ideological roots. They come from the Theravada Buddhism, which is one of the schools of thought of Buddhism. And over the past history, there has been a lot of sharing of that learning and that knowledge. But definitely, I think over the last 10 years or so, there has been in both Myanmar and Sri Lanka, but also in Thailand, this reawakening of this quest to kind of recapture the Buddhist lands that people now say that were taken over by the Muslims. And so you're seeing this there. And so there has been this exchange of ideas. And in fact, the monk Wiratu, who is responsible in Myanmar, has been very close to several of the extreme Buddhist elements within Sri Lanka. In fact, visited Sri Lanka in 2013 or 2014 to really push forward this this notion of a transnational Buddhist link.
Okay.
So you're seeing very much that sharing of
It's
information.
an ideological move as far as you're concerned. Okay, let's go to the
It is.
doctor, our doctor, who is Dr. Kamal Abdul Nasser. Question to you. Why is it that government is insisting on this? Is it medically needed that the COVID patients must be cremated, or is it safe to bury them? What's going on?
Yeah, medically, if you talk in medical terms, no, you don't need to cremate all the bodies. If you look at the countries doing cremation only policy, it's China and Sri Lanka. But if you look at the virology of it, the virus, this COVID virus or any other virus, would need a living cell to multiply. So if a person is infected, if the person is living, yes, the virus will multiply. But once the patient dies, the virus also should die within a few days, maybe about 3 days. We have tried to explain this. We have given all the scientific facts to all the committees, ministers, including the president, but they don't seem to, I don't think they are not understanding, but they don't want to understand this fact. And the health ministry has appointed a committee called an expert committee to work on it. But the unfortunate thing is they have appointed some judicial medical officers, a professor from geology, and various other people, but no virologists are there in the committee. And no clinicians are there. The clinicians who are treating patients would know what's going on. If you know Professor Malik Pires, he is a renowned professor from Sri Lanka who works in Hong Kong. His laboratory is the reference laboratory for virology by WHO. He's a Sri Lankan, and he last week gave an interview to national papers that it's not necessary, cremation is not necessary, the bodies can be buried. What we are asking for is even with strictest conditions, like, you can have a concrete sort of burial done. You can make concrete and close everything. You can put a double bag and a sealed coffin. We don't need whistle. We don't need to touch or do anything. We just want a burial. But we have gone up to the Superior Court of Sri Lanka, and we have lost all all our efforts.
So what's
now,
next, doctor? If you have done everything, you presented medical evidence,
yes,
you have brought the experts from the world, you have
yes,
applied to the Supreme Court of Sri Lanka, and you have
yeah,
failed in convincing the government, you have lost the case. What's there to do now?
we are now at the moment, we are mobilizing the civil society, protesting against this burial issue. Not only Muslim, I don't see this as a pure Muslim issue. It has to be looked at human perspective. There are many Buddhists and Hindus who would like to bury their relatives, especially Christians. They make up about 6% of the population. They want to bury the bodies. And the worst thing is they don't even allow the relatives to look at the body and identify the person. Nobody knows who is being cremated. And the relatives don't know whether it's their father or the mother who has been cremated. The problem with the Muslim community in Sri Lanka is, if you take the capital of Sri Lanka, the Colombo, has a huge Muslim population who are living in very crowded shanty areas. Now the most affected part is Colombo, and we see a lot of Muslim deaths, unproportionate levels of Muslim deaths because of the living conditions of Muslims and the community structure of the Muslims, because they do live in clusters and with families and friends, not like the other communities in Sri Lanka. So therefore we see a sort of more deaths in the Muslim community. And now the problem is the Muslim community is not scared of dying, but they are very, very scared of being burnt. So they are trying not to seek medical help even if they have a heart attack, even for a pneumonia or a heart attack
Because
or a diabetes.
the law is
Don't want to
very
go to hospital.
the law is very dangerous, isn't it, Brother Iqbal? Because the law is saying, the government's enacted law is saying that if somebody dies of COVID-19 or suspected of dying of COVID-19, they should be cremated. That's very dangerous.
Indeed. The second word is even more dangerous, and that is suspected. And we have received case profiles of a number of persons who have died without conclusive evidence of there being of COVID case. The example of a 20-day-old baby, which has been on the viral through the clip that has been going on across the world at the moment. Was in fact, the parents were told it's of a COVID case, but both the parents were tested negative. They were indoors during time of the COVID, and how could that baby have been infected with COVID? So, but the issue is that this is primarily a political issue. There's no medical evidence, as Dr. Abdul has just mentioned, supported by the top virologists around the world, of such issue or such cases where virus could be spread through the dead bodies. Now the issue is, if it's political, and because of as Brother Amjad mentioned earlier, the crisis we have had of the bombing that took place, and some sort of collective punishment on the Muslim community, particularly in Sri Lanka, is a dangerous precedent. God forbid, and I'm confident that inshallah ta'ala, with the collective efforts of the communities around the world, and very rightly it's a human rights issue, so we have got now people of all faith are joining in, and people of no faith are joining in, because it is something that is not acceptable on the basis of the international law. And of course the pressure is now mounting on the Sri Lankan government from different countries. We are in touch with about 15 countries who have provided us clear support, from the heads of state into the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And the ambassadors of Sri Lanka have been called in, including our government in the UK. The Foreign Secretary, I think, very shortly will be making a statement. The foreign ministers, two foreign ministers in the department, have already conveyed their concerns directly to the Sri Lankan High Commissioner. And it's now a clear message to the government of Sri Lanka that this is not acceptable.
180 countries have been following World Health Organization's guidelines, and none of them have insisted on forcible cremation of anybody. And if democracies around the globe, countries that abide by international law and treaties, as well as World Health Organization's advice, what I don't understand, Amjad Salim, is that what makes Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa so different? Why is he hell-bent on punishing the Muslims in this way? What have the Muslims done against him? Have they not voted for him in the last election? Did they campaign against him? Why is he so vengeful against them?
That's a very good question. I think it's a multitude of factors. I think one is it's political in terms of speaking to a certain electorate that is that feels that they are disenfranchised, that they are somehow at a disadvantage because of the minorities. And so this type of rhetoric is something very similar to what we're seeing in the UK or in the US, where so the majority is feeling something against minority, right? So I think that's one. So part of this is very much political. It's about securing that vote. Part of it also is that, Sri Lanka historically has had conflicts with its minorities. We had a 30-year-old conflict, 1883 to 2009, predominantly against the Tamil community, on very similar kind of challenges, where the Tamil community was seen as a threat, and then they were forced out, or that pressure was there. And so this is something that we're seeing as part of the historical nature of Sri Lanka. But I think if you read social media, if you look at some of the stuff that is there, a lot of what is coming out is exactly as what Brother Iqbal said. It is sort of seen as collective punishment for a community that is deemed to be complicit in last year's bombing, even though I think this itself was such a huge shock and surprise to the Sri Lankan Muslim community. We've never actually engaged in conflict before, never really took to arms, even at the height of the conflict when they were under pressure, and they were kicked out of Jaffna or like the north and stuff like that. So I think that this is a real challenge. But I think it has been trying to feed a narrative around the Muslims, who Muslims are different, and so that has spiraled out. And so we shouldn't forget as well that between March to sort of August was the time when there was the start of the campaigning for the parliamentary elections, and all of that has played into it. And I think it really shows you.
Do you have any Muslim parliamentarians in Sri Lankan parliament?
There are Muslim parliamentarians. There are several Muslim parties. Most of the Muslim parties are currently in the opposition. You have Muslim parliamentarians who are there. In fact, the current Minister for Justice is from the Muslim community, but sadly they've not been effective enough to stop this or to voice their pressure against it. And we've just recently had the 20th Amendment, which is giving sort of unwilling powers to the president. In that, we had 6 Muslim parliamentarians that actually voted for it, despite the fact that they know that this was really turning the clock back in terms of executive powers. But
so Rajapaksa is actually the president, not the prime minister, and I got that wrong.
No, Mahinda Rajapaksa is the prime minister. His brother Gotabaya Rajapaksa is the president. So there is a very sort of interesting phenomenon in Sri Lanka, where currently you have the two kind of most important posts in the country are run by members of the same family, and then within the cabinet you have members of other families. Members
There's a lot of nepotism going on, I can see. Okay, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we want to continue our discussion and look for some solutions. Brother Iqbal, are you able to stay with us, or do you have to go? I'm going to be...
I can stay for another 5 to 7 minutes.
Okay, so let's do a quick break. When you come back, I'm going to get you to say a few words, and then we'll say goodbye to you with our gratitude to you, of course. Thank you, but just stay there. Don't go anywhere. We're going to take a quick break, ladies and gentlemen. When we come back, we want to ask you, as well as our guests, for what solution? What should we do to Sri Lankan government? How can we put pressure on that government to stop this absolute draconian, disproportionate and totally unacceptable policy of forcible cremation of Muslims and Christians? Don't go too far away. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back. We're talking about Sri Lanka. Did you know in Sri Lanka, the government is forcibly cremating Muslims as well as Christians, but against the will of people? If you are suspected of COVID-19, if you have died of COVID-19, or you're suspected of dying of COVID-19, or died of COVID-19, you would be cremated. That's what the new law says. It's a mandatory cremation in Sri Lanka, led by a virulent, rather pugnacious Buddhist ideology that has swept Burma, or Myanmar as we know it now, and Thailand and Sri Lanka. It is sad, but it is happening. আপনারা যদি আমাদের প্রোগ্রাম এতক্ষণ দেখে থাকেন, তাহলে আপনারা বুঝতে পারবেন যে শ্রীলঙ্কাতে মুসলমানদেরকে জোরালোভাবে জ্বালানো হচ্ছে, ক্রিমেশন করা হচ্ছে তাদের ওফাতের পরে, মৃত্যুর পরে, কোভিড-19 কারণে, অথবা কোভিড-19 উপরে যদি কেউ সাসপেক্টেড হয়, তাহলে তারা মারা যাওয়ার পরে তাদেরকে ফোর্সিবলি ক্রিমেট করা হয়, জ্বালানো হয়। হিন্দু ধর্মের মতো বুদ্ধিস্টদের ধর্মেও এটা হয়। মুসলমান এবং খ্রিস্টানদেরকে তারা জোরালোভাবে এটা করতেছে। এই জন্যে আমরা আজকের প্রোগ্রাম এই ব্যাপারে কথা বলতেছি। আপনাদের যদি কোনো প্রশ্ন থাকে, আপনারা আমাদেরকে কল করতে পারেন। If you've got any questions to ask on this topic or join in the conversation, please do give us a call. We're here joined by Iqbal Sakrani, Amjad Salim, and Dr. Abdul Nasir. We've been very honored by their presence. Let's go straight to Brother Iqbal Sakrani, because you want to go. You've got a lineup of telephone calls and conversations to have. So what solution are you proposing, Brother Iqbal? What do you want to do? How do you think we can get this government to heed?
Well, first of all, I think as Muslims, of course, we are optimists, and we believe that this sort of huge form of calamity that I believe has actually befallen the Ummah will be removed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is a prerequisite, and that is some sort of action that needs to be taken on the ground. And therefore, every person who is watching the program, Brother Ajmal, it's imperative on them to be part of it. We cannot accept a single brother or sister or a baby being cremated. How would we feel ourselves? The way I look at it, if ever my sibling or family member were to be cremated, what would be my feeling, the state I would be going in? So it's a collective duty. And by being collective duty, I believe that we now have got the MCB on board, taking this as an issue which they want to deal with, not just nationally, but internationally, and directly confronting the Sri Lankan government with legal action if necessary. If the directive of the health committee, the health department, supported by, of course, the Supreme Court, is not rescinded, then they will face a major legal action either through the International Criminal Court or through International Tribunal through the United
But how will you
Nations.
do that when they are not signatory to either of those? They have actually taken themselves out since
I
the
believe
last.
that they have signed. I believe they have signed certain protocols that we have managed to establish.
Oh,
They
I
have
see.
signed protocols of international certain aspects of it. They have come out others, but the fact is that they cannot get away from the international conventions, and particularly the directives that have been given by the organs of the UN, including the WHO. And now they must understand that this is not no longer a Sri Lankan issue. This is an issue that is now where the Southeast Asia, the ASEAN group are now being involved, the AU, the African Unity Group through South Africa and others are going to take action on it, including, of course, the European Union. The message. So there is international pressure being building up that if Sri Lanka does not heed to a very fair and a balanced argument, that the argument they have got is rather of spurious nature, which does not hold ground, as we have heard from our medical expert, and therefore they have got no choice but to change the decision and behave in the manner like we would expect a sovereign government to behave.
Okay.
So it's just a matter of time.
So you are prepared to go. You're prepared to go all the way, Brother Iqbal. Take them to the court.
Inshallah, I think we have the support. We have spoken to people across, and there's hardly a person from eminent QCs to heads of states, to ministers, and to our community leaders. Everybody says we are totally behind you.
Okay.
So this is, in my last 30, 40 years, Brother Ajmal, of Alhamdulillah community work in different areas, we have done. This is one issue where there is a uniformity and unanimity across the people from all backgrounds to support this cause.
Thank you very much, Brother Iqbal, for your time, for your hard work. May Allah bless you. I'm going to let you go because I know you've got to go back to your phone calls. I don't know what time you go to sleep, but may Allah give you long life and good health and keep you strong and forever happy, inshallah. Thank you, Brother Iqbal.
Jazakumullah khairan.
Barakallahu fikum. Salamu alaikum. That was Sir Iqbal Sakrani, former Secretary General of MCB and currently member of the MCB task force for Sri Lanka. Let's go back to Amjad Salim. Amjad Salim, so what's the solution then? Do we have any legal recourse on this? Can actually Sri Lankan government be brought to face the wrath of the law?
I think there's a number of different avenues. I think one avenue is, of course, the legal route. The other avenue is just to kind of keep it in the media and have that sustained pressure. As Dr. Abdul Nasser was saying, that the domestic moves have all been exhausted up to the Supreme Court, but there is a growing tide of public protest. People are protesting from all the communities, Buddhist, Christian, Hindu. They are protesting. There's a white ribbon campaign that is now being done in Sri Lanka, where people are tying white ribbons to the cemetery grounds and then to their houses. And what's quite interesting is that on the public places where these white ribbons have been put up, every day it's taken down by the police, and every day it goes up again, right? So there's a sustained pressure on that, and so I think we have to. That is what will ultimately sort of dent that sort of standing. I am not I'm not sure because if you look in the past history of Sri Lanka, particularly with when it came to resolutions in the Human Rights Council of its conduct at the end of the war and everything else, I think it has proved resistance because it does have some backers like China and Russia. So I'm not sure how much it would dent it, but I think that the fact that this is becoming a sustained public social media pressure, where governments are asking, which have a number of where Sri Lanka has a number of interests in terms of trade and education and things like that. I think that is going to put some time and put some pressure on that. So I think that is inshallah the way I think we need to move forward. But also there is a growing momentum of people even in the country.
And I understand all that, but given the history of Sri Lanka and how Islamophobic, anti-Muslim bigotry has spread, how the media in Sri Lanka has whipped up a frenzy, calling the Muslims the outsider, the traitors, etc., even demanding that the Muslims should go back to where they came from, that they're originally Arabs or they're from other countries. All of these things, it's going to be very difficult to reverse all of that trend, given the fact that media frenzy has been against Muslims. But I want to come back to this issue later. Let's get the doctor back in the conversation. Doctor, apart from medical evidence, apart from getting international medical agencies to place evidences, medically speaking, there's not much you can do. I can't see anything else you can do except keep on pressurizing the government with evidence, right?
Yes, really. I have lots of Buddhist friends and many doctors who are Buddhists and many specialists working in Sri Lanka. They were not really talking about this. They were sort of keeping silent when a small minority of group of people sort of advising the government. For the last few days, I see people coming out and talking about it with all sorts of social media and all protests and civil activities. So even today, I saw my friends in Facebook boldly talking about it and saying, this is racism and we should get rid of this. So I think we should give sustained pressure to all, like from all sides, including local and the international pressure. And I don't think we can give any more medical evidence for this. And today I was listening to one of the Sri Lankan media sort of channel where one of the geology professors, and she's the one who is talking against this again and again, and was talking about minks that were buried in Denmark. And she was showing that, they are going to again burn all the minks because, they were causing environmental problems. But she was sort of trying to say that if the minks are causing problems to the environment, these bodies are going to cause it. But it's not the same. The minks that were buried were very shallow. They were put into very shallow pits, and they produced all the gases and started bursting off. So we are going to bury the bodies 6 feet or even 8 feet under the ground with 2 layers of a plastic covering and a sealed coffin. These plastics should take years and years to disintegrate. So it's not a question of virus leaking into the water tables. So
that's a myth. Let's clarify this. So a human body buried under the ground cannot come out or cannot release the virus to infect anyone who's living. That's for sure. That's correct, right, doctor?
Yes, definitely.
So that's a myth. And human virus that's been buried with the dead, the COVID-19 dead, their virus cannot then filter down to or cascade down to the water level and infect people through the water system either, right?
It depends on which virus it is. The coronavirus is, we call it an enveloped virus, which with water or any liquids, they don't survive. And some of the viruses like cholera, or the cholera is the bacteria, like hepatitis or something. This hepatitis virus can survive in water and then they could be transmitted, but not this virus. It has been clearly shown that is not transmissible.
That's why we have to wash our hands so frequently,
Yes,
because
yes,
it doesn't
and-
survive with washing our hands.
Even if we say this can reach the water tables and can infect people, we are going to bury with 2 layers of plastic bags and sealed coffin. So it's very, very.
But leaving aside all of that, what
Yes.
we are hearing now from yourselves, as well as from the Sri Lankan communities, is very simple. That there is a government who is deeply Islamophobic, does not like the minorities in its own country, wants to
Yes.
establish a militant, extremist ideology of Buddhism in their country. And in that process, they don't care who they upset, they don't care who they cause trouble for, they're going to have their way. So therefore, producing all this evidence is useless.
Yes, yeah. But today, for about maybe 5 days, for the last 5 days, there had been few changes. We were asked to buy some freezer containers and keep those bodies. We are now keeping some 8 bodies in freezer containers, pending some sort of a positive decision from the committee that was appointed by the health ministry. But today there was another case in the southern part of Sri Lanka that's called the Gaul, where there was a body to be cremated. The family went to the courts, and then today the Director General of Health Services has given directive to cremate the body. So sometimes we feel like some positive message is coming, but the next minute there is another negative message, which is very, very distressing.
Just so that our viewers are clear, we did invite the Sri Lankan government and their embassy to speak and send a guest so that they can defend their case, but they did not respond to us, and our door to any Sri Lankan official from their government or the embassy is always open. We are a media organization. We offer our platform as objectively as we can, but when there is a human rights violation, when there is trampling of rights of minorities, we will speak up, and we will speak up very clearly. And this is what we're doing here, trying to create a discussion as to why could a government do this? Is a COVID suspect such that we should burn them, we should cremate them, and if there are myths around them, we should of course be very robust in dealing with them. Salim, to you now, back to you. So apart from political lobbying, apart from getting the media on your side, apart from getting the activists on the ground, is there anything else we can do from this country, from UK, from Europe, from America, from Australia, wherever we are, apart from Sri Lanka, from outside? What can we do?
I think it's twofold. One is just keep that pressure up, keep on writing, keep on challenging the High Commission and writing that. The other one, of course, is that there are a lot of particularly around trade, which is where I think Sri Lanka will feel the pinch, right? So it is where those questions need to be asked. And
what does Sri Lanka produce that we can boycott?
Well, I wouldn't also say bike, but it is around tea, it is around rubber, and as and when.
So Sri Lankan tea. Hold on a second. Sri Lankan tea. Are you talking about the tea from? Is it, what's the name of the companies?
Well, it's Ceylon tea.
Ceylon tea. Okay. So if we want to really dent Sri Lankan confidence, we should perhaps consider, and this is a consider. Coming together and saying we will boycott Sri Lankan tea.
Yeah, and also I would sort of say there's other aspects of it as well, right? I mean there's a number of things that particularly in many parts of the world where Sri Lanka is dependent, of course, on like Bangladesh. Sri Lanka sends migrant workers. There's a lot of students that are there. I mean these are things that we need to look at, and also once it opens up after the COVID vaccines, Sri Lanka is dependent on tourism.
Yes, I'm fortunate enough to have been a tourist to Sri Lanka in 2002, I think, or 3, and it was a very good experience. Those days things were slightly different. Things have become pretty bad and nasty lately, and that's what worries me. What worries me more is the fact that the very nasty strand of Buddhism that we associate with love, peace, harmony, lots of Shanti type of a mantra, that kind of a very mellow, peaceful environment. We talk about Buddhism in that sense, and yet we are seeing Buddhism in the name of Buddhism, in Sri Lanka now, and of course in Myanmar as well as in Thailand, massacres have taken place against the Muslims. Why? And that's what I want to know. Why do this particular strand of Buddhism feel the need to consider Muslims as their enemy? Salim, do you have any insight about why they think Muslims are enemy?
I don't think in the case of Sri Lanka, it's not just Muslims are enemies, right? I think, if you look at historically, I mean, like I said, we've had a conflict. We had a conflict from 83 to 2009. That conflict was not predominantly with the Muslims. That conflict was with the Tamil Hindu Christians, right? And that was an ethnic conflict that lasted and came to a very, very bitter and brutal end in 2009. So I think you are seeing that there has been over the past few years, there has been this sort of justification from a theological perspective, but also the kind of Theravada Buddhism is known to be a very sort of activist kind of strand of Buddhism. It's not the kind of the one that we associate, say, particularly with the Dalai Lama, for example, I think. Even historically, the Sri Lankan Buddhism have been known. I mean, the whole concept of
you mean they're like the Daesh of the Muslim community, the ISIS.
I wouldn't go that far, right?
You won't go that far, but I'm asking, would you consider them to be as militant?
No, I wouldn't go that far, because I think Sri Lanka has a very historical relationship with Buddhism. It was where Buddha was known to have
no, but Buddha would not have. Hold on, Buddha would not have allowed his students or disciples to behave like this, for sure. So if these are people who have twisted their Buddhist mantra and philosophy, surely we should call out for who they are.
But this goes beyond just this particular aspect, right? I think the whole theology has been built on identity and Buddhism. It has its roots in colonialism as well, in how they were treated, and so there's a number of different aspects. And even as part of independence, the Buddhist monks were part of that whole movement. So I think it's not, there has been these things have evolved over time, and there is an insecurity about who the minorities are and who the Sinhalese are. And I think this is all fed in. So I think you can't look at what has happened over the last 10 years without understanding the 30-year conflict, without understanding.
I understand, but that has nothing to do with the Muslims. Muslims have not played a role in the conflict. So therefore, singling out the Muslims in Sri Lanka doesn't help at all, does it?
It doesn't help, but then the Tamils were singled out for 30 years.
But right? there was a conflict within the Tamil community.
There was a conflict against the Tamils. But if you look at how at the sort of precursors to all of this, there's similar causes there.
It's awfully generous of you, being a Sri Lankan yourself, a Muslim, seeing what's going on and being very generous with the government. I wouldn't be as generous as you, but I commend you. And let's go to Dr. Abul Nasser. Dr. Abul Nasser, what else can you do, and what else can we do apart from lobbying, keeping the pressure up? What would you like us to do?
I would ask everyone to pray for us. That's the last thing I can ask for. I think your prayers will definitely help us. And again, every government should give pressure, especially from the academic side, like the medical associations, virologists, physicians. They can even. Countries like Bangladesh, Pakistan, those countries can help us from not only from the political side, but also academic side, they can help us.
Okay, well, there is a lot that we can do, especially the Middle Eastern countries, ladies and gentlemen. In the Middle East, we have a lot of Sri Lankan community who work across the Middle East, from UAE to Saudi Arabia to Bahrain and other places. Middle Eastern government can do a huge amount. I'm not sure to what extent they've done what they've done. A recent story, Dr. Abdul Nasser, that came to my attention that really disturbed me, and that is apparently the Maldives government said, why don't you send the dead bodies to us, we'll bury them. Is that true?
Yes, apparently the government requested the Maldivian government to send the bodies to Maldives. If you compare the Maldives and Sri Lanka, the Maldives has very tiny islands, and if you bury a body, and if it is a danger to your water tables, that should be the country first to worry about it, because it's so small islands.
So it makes no sense, really. It
The
makes no
people,
sense.
the Sri Lankan Muslims didn't like it, and they refused to accept it. And then there was, but the Maldivian government was ready to accept it.
Well, you know what, ladies and gentlemen, that actually says it all to me. When a government is willing to send over dead bodies to another country for burial, it shows how low they've stooped, and that is a sickening reality of current Sri Lankan government. Whoever the government is, when they go down that route, there is racism, there is bigotry, there is Islamophobia, there is hatred towards the minorities. We will speak up. We will speak out against such a vile government. Ladies and gentlemen, we should write to our MPs, we should write to our government, we should write to the Sri Lankan embassy, we should write to Sri Lankan government too, demanding an end to this discrimination. We're not asking Sri Lankan government to do anything else except provide equal opportunities and equal status to all its citizens, and respect people's individual as well as their religious and cultural demands. And I don't understand why one would have to put people to misery even at their death, which really saddens me and disturbs me. I pray that people of Sri Lanka stay united and see the sense of remaining united and not discriminate one another. And I pray that the Muslims of Sri Lanka find a solution as soon as possible. And I also pray that the government of Sri Lanka wake up and realize their mistakes. Ladies and gentlemen, with these words I'll finish, but my deep thanks to Salim Amjad and Dr. Kamal Abdul Nasir, and of course Sir Iqbal Sakrani, who was in our program earlier on. Until next time, from myself and my guests, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.